Hello and welcome to another Office 365 Hours. My name is Christian Buckley. I'm the Brand Alliance Director here at AvePoint and a Microsoft MVP and Regional Director. And I'm joined today by Jay Leask, a fellow Office Apps and Services MVP and the Director of Federal Strategy and Strategic Accounts here at AvePoint. Good morning, Jay.
Good morning, Christian. I really thought you were going to say federal strategery there.
I wanted to say Director of Federal Strategery, and because that's all encompassing, really. Truly.
It is. You know, I have kind of a hybrid role. I've got a technical background, but I'm also a sales director. So it depends on the conversation I'm having. Am I the federal strategic lead, or am I the national security director for the United States? We never know.
That is strategery at its finest right there. You've just described it. Well, today this is a topic that's meant for you, really, because it was meant for you. The topic of what is the state of collaboration in Gov? So
Yeah.
government, and maybe a great place to start here is to talk about some of the differences, some of the nuances between collaboration platforms, what's generally available to commercial customers versus Gov customers. So I know that Microsoft has different solutions. I realize they do that for education customers, and government customers are probably the two most distinct entities. No, I don't pay as much attention to some of those differences because I don't really work directly with a lot of those customers.
Right.
But what are some of those differences?
Yeah. So what's interesting for some background is they have specific tenants that we call them the national tenants for the government. There's GCC, which is a FedRAMP moderate environment. There's GCC High, which is designed after the FedRAMP High, although it is still in progress. There's DoD, which is specifically for the defense, the Department of Defense and related agencies. And then there's also the oncoming secret clouds. So there's a number of different things, and as you go to each one of those,
Are you supposed to talk about the secret clouds? I just want to make sure. Are we clear on that? Are we?
We just call them Bruno.
Okay.
Yeah. So as you go from each of those, from commercial to GCC and up, you'll notice there is the phrase delay in when features come to the clouds happens, and it's not a delay. It is for delay's sake. It is a recognition that every time you deploy something, a new major feature, you have to go through an approval process, especially at these highly sensitive workspace tenants. My brain's not working today. So there are some delays. There are some capability gaps, especially as you get towards the secret clouds and such that are coming out. We expect a significant delay there. So you asked what are some of the differences? The very first one is Yammer. Yammer does not exist in any of the government clouds and probably won't. There are ways that you can get access to it. There are some approval processes you can go through, but it will always be in a commercial environment. Beyond that, for the most part, what we see are major new features. So on the administrative side, there's some differences in the capabilities that you have in order to automate your administration. For example, the information governance stuff is still being rolled out into these higher clouds. There are also features like on Microsoft Viva, which is the employee experience platform. That stuff is coming. I think Connections is out in government. Topics is starting to roll out. But while it's new in commercial, it's roadmap.
It takes a while.
In these higher clouds. Yep.
I was going to ask you specifically about those things because they are, so much more involved. Well, Connections is more of a surfacing of information, but Topics is so entrenched within the structure and involvement. How that actually looks. I'm sure we'll have case studies in a year or two around the differences there.
Yep. So it's that timing. It's a new feature's announced. Is it a major feature? We're probably 6 to 18 months from it getting into these higher clouds. If it's just an update to an existing feature, that may roll out simultaneously. A lot of these updates to Teams, for example, they're coming out right on top of the commercial release. And in fact, the government is what's driving a lot of these capabilities.
Well,
So,
I'd be interested. I don't know if you know the answer to this, but when Microsoft started adding, well, with all the roadmap discussions, and I know that as an MVP, we receive early access and visibility to a lot of the things as they're coming up. We're able to see them sometimes participate in pilots around those things, but
mhm.
provide feedback back on these features. There was a strong pushback a few years back around Microsoft with this evergreen software. That's what SaaS is,
Yeah.
software as a service. It's evergreen. As updates are made, they get pushed out. Where people were saying in the commercial sector, saying it's too much, it's too fast. You're not allowing us, especially a lot of iterative or refining features. That's fine, but when it's major features,
Yes.
you need to give us time to take a look, to understand the impact, to train, to prepare for that. And so you have this ability as a commercial user to go in and delay certain features in a certain amount of time. Microsoft built in some leeway. That leeway, was that driven by government, or was that just they were just another recipient of the same feature set? Do you know?
I would say so. I don't know if that was the deciding factor or what, but that was definitely a major concern. The government has traditionally held a very strong lock around updates to their network. You
Yeah.
know, anytime you're updating a server, anytime you're updating an end user piece of software, you have to communicate what's coming. You have to have a very strong procedure. You have to be able to roll back. So I'm sure that the government was saying the same things, if not driving it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I've worked with customers that were laggards on technology, but
Yep.
due to security and compliance standards that they were, beholden to. They needed to make sure that it met all of those, were certified solutions, and then would roll into that. So it was
Yep.
much slower. And obviously, what happens, there's a whole nother set of problems that happen. I don't know that this happens is true within the government sector, but where a lot of shadow IT is created because it's not happening fast enough. End users are they're aware of the new features that are being talked about at the latest conference. They
Hmm.
want to get their hands on that. And so they'll go around IT, go around a lot of the process. And as happens, we'll create these shadow IT efforts to go and try and play with these new technologies that then find their way into the organization.
Yeah, it's really interesting too. One of the things that Microsoft 365 has driven is this centralization of collaboration, right? So anyone who looks at Microsoft, who looks at M365 and the capabilities therein, understands the value likely of what it is to get everyone in one space. So if you look at some of these large or federal agencies, the National Institutes of Health, which has 27 different institutes that previously were all in their own environments, but now are all in one M365 environment managed by one organization.
Uh,
The US courts, 300 different organizations that all manage their own things, but now are all coming into one centrally managed tenant. Shadow IT means something even bigger now than it did before. Before it was, every department had their own SharePoint farm. Everything was kind of shadow IT, ironically. Nowadays, you're looking at not just, do we have a few users using Gmail to share things? You're looking at whole departments who are going their own direction. If you look at what happened with the Defense Department, you know, the goal when COVID hit, Microsoft stood up something called the CVR, which allowed for all defense departments to come together and collaborate for a short period of time. It was originally, I think, 9 months. It lasted around 16, but what it showed was the power of everyone coming together. And now, when they shut that down, each of those defense departments started standing their own M365 environments up, more or less making a shadow IT per command or per department, which
mm,
I'm over exaggerating a little bit but the idea is the same, right? Shadow IT is all about a central governing body wanting everyone to come together and use their environment, and other bodies creating their own, usually in an unmanaged fashion. In this case, we're
Right.
talking about larger scale, so there's management, just not where you may or may not want it, right? So it is very interesting what's happened through all of that.
Well, it's amazing to think of how much that collaboration has changed
Mm-hmm.
in general, but for specifically for government. I mean, I remember when I started getting into specifically SaaS-based collaboration technology in 2001. I was a product manager for a company that built a dedicated hosted cloud collaboration environment. Not
Yep.
Microsoft technology, folks. This is predates what is now out there, Office 365. But actually is part of the reason why I got hired by Microsoft to help build what is Office 365 was because of this experience. But we were just constantly butting up against companies that were like wanted to buy in the future, but were so fearful of the cloud
Yeah.
and moving across. And so even 10, 12 years ago, after I left Microsoft and went to work for an ISV, so many of the customers and within state and local, for example, were that I worked with in the state of Washington, had a couple clients there that were so reluctant to move their majority of their data. They were looking at even a hybrid solution to use. They wanted their email in the cloud, but they would
Mm-hmm.
not move their data. They would not move their
Right.
systems. And
Right.
then it was they wanted the collaboration front end for more ad hoc things out in the cloud, but anything important was again still on prem and behind that firewall. So how much has that changed? The fear of the cloud changed within government?
I mean, I think there's still a healthy concern, but there's a recognition that they can't not move to the cloud and expect to be able to work from anywhere, for example, or expect to be able to get the latest features, or expect to be able to collaborate like you can on a Facebook or Twitter-like environment. So there's been a realization that while there's still concern, there's still security issues that you need to have a plan for the most part, it's actually a more secure environment. For example, the amount of money that is put into security by Microsoft vastly outweighs any amount of money any single organization can put into securing their environment. So what do? They say my network is secure, therefore my content is secure. But we've seen that that's not true. We've seen the malicious insider get something that you just didn't think to secure because it was inside your network, right? Whereas with the tools that come from Microsoft, sure, there's a larger surface area, a larger attack vector, but there are more controls to secure your information, both from the external and the internal. And so there's, again, a healthy concern, but that's something that you plan for. Versus we used to have that, I would say, a fear back 3 years ago, even, that restricted organizations, federal agencies from moving to the cloud. That fear was pushed aside when COVID hit. And I think they've seen that, hey, this can be safe. We just need to be smart about it.
Yeah, it's interesting that just kind of on a flip side to that you have organizations that they think, well, because Microsoft touts that they have all of these certifications, they have all these standards and that they are secure, thereby we're using Microsoft 365, we're automatically secure.
Mm,
And that's another incorrect way of looking
right,
at the world and these systems, that
right.
so much of the responsibility still is that you're using it the right way, using it, optimizing it for that, and then constantly, I mean, I use the governance, the G word all the time, that you're constantly reviewing, looking at as your end users, your employees get smarter, they
Yep.
start understanding the capabilities. um, Another aspect important of governance, and we've talked about a couple times now, shadow IT,
Mm-hmm.
is not just shutting down those efforts, and it's the same no matter what sector that you're working in, commercial, government, what have you. That when you see that behavior, you need to ask questions,
Yes.
and rather than just shut it down, that you need to understand, does this person, does this team, this side of the organization not understand the capabilities that are there? Or are we missing some feature set or capability that we should be providing that we don't have enabled? Are there valid reasons? Do we just need to explain to them, this is why we do it this way, or why we don't do this at all? Here are the reasons why. What can we do? Let's work together. Have that conversation.
Yeah.
That should be part of any discussion around governance.
So one of the topics that I preach the most when I speak at conferences around the circuit here is the definition of success for an IT organization is no longer, I deployed this software, I migrated the content from one environment to the next. It's IT is there to solve problems, to provide solutions. And in order to do that, you have to ask the business, what is blocking you from being successful with your mission? What is keeping you from being able to accomplish what you need to? And then, when you deploy something, you need to say, here's what we deployed. Here's why we deployed it. Here's why we put these controls around it. What gaps do you have? Okay, now we have to work together to make sure those gaps are filled, because otherwise, shadow IT is going to appear, data is going to be shared in an unsecure manner, and we're going to be right back where we started. It doesn't matter how many certifications Microsoft has. If your users are sharing something with a free Gmail account, all of your data is at risk there. So,
well, Jay, given your broad strategery reach across these entities, so what is the state of collaboration for government? I know it's kind of a big question, but I mean, in generally, how is it viewed? I mean, because it took a long time for commercial customers to realize, hey, this stuff is actually business critical. I think with the pandemic now in our rear view mirror, is that it's, organizations have understood really that it was collaboration technology that saved us from being able to be as productive as we were able to be. So what's the view within government?
So a couple things. One, for those of you listening at home but not watching the video, Christian did cross all of his fingers when he said that. And yes, we can hope it is in our rear view for sure. So a couple of thoughts. One, the government learned that employees can successfully work remotely, but they proved which ones can't. And that's a very important step. When you can prove that, we can work remotely, you can change how you do your business. But when you can then validate your assumptions on which ones can't, you can start to put new restrictions in play so that the right people are granted this privilege, and the people who are going to take advantage of it are either monitored, moved on, or put in an environment where they can be successful. That's the first thing we learned. The second thing we learned is absolutely what you said. Proper collaboration tools are mission critical for success. Even if you're not allowing people to work remotely, the Federal Reserve has banks all across the country, and assuming that everyone who needs to work together is in the same office is a mistake. The Department of Defense has millions of government and contractor and military employees all across the world, providing solutions to them that they can communicate and collaborate with people who aren't in their office, in the field with them. That is absolutely imperative to the success of their mission. So that's something that we learned. When it comes to what is the state of collaboration, we've learned that collaboration technology is mission critical. I think the next thing that we learned is that in order for it to work, it does have to get more centralized. You can't rely on a SharePoint farm underneath someone's desk to support an enterprise of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, or in the Army's case, over 1 million users. You have to have an enterprise capable solution that not only handles the scale, but enables cross-team collaboration. breaking down the silos of what we've seen for decades and enabling someone from this division to work with someone from that division and share information safely. That's another thing that I think they've learned is, so the zero trust strategy that has been pushed down from the president's office has to include a lens on your collaboration. And so often that strategy goes from the technology to the data without any concern other than who the user is. You forget that for the data to be properly secured, it has to be properly tagged, which means somebody is relied upon to go in and say, this is this kind of sensitive information. And in a zero trust world, that's a miss by default. So it's something that has to be considered. So what's the state of collaboration in government? We have agencies who had previously never had a central collaboration space all coming into one location. We have central IT organizations suddenly going, wait, we don't have the budget or scale or employees to handle this. And we have the end user departments going, but we need this to be successful. So it is a major shakeup of where we were 3 years ago even. But I think a lot of benefit has come out of it.
I just thought of a sticker. I know you'll appreciate this, but on this, the point is that that tagline of act locally, but think globally or whatever that it is. So I thought, act locally or like collaborate locally, manage globally.
Ooh, interesting.
So I think we can make that sticker happen, Jay.
I'm loving it. I'm loving it. Let's do it.
Talk to the design team.
We have the technology.
I know there's a lot that's going on within this space, and it's constantly changing. I mean, it literally is. To say that it daily might be too much, but definitely weekly. There is something going on, major or minor announcements around that touch on each of the different systems that drive conversation for certainly for us about what's happening commercially, what's happening, when is that coming over to government and education and retail and for each of these other clouds, these other sectors. There's so much that's going on now more than ever. It's important that we pay attention and we listen to the changes that are coming and we incorporate that into our thinking, into our planning. How is this going to impact us? What's the potential here? And have those conversations that will help to get things ready for when the features become available within each of these areas. Having the conversations early.
Yeah, it's you will need as an organization to put somebody in charge of following that roadmap. You will need a cadence of talking to your Microsoft support team to know what's coming and when's it coming. We can't just wait until we get the bits and bytes and then ready to install it. It's coming whether you're ready or not. And so that's now a cost of doing business is having someone whose job it is, or a group of people who share the responsibility to make sure we know what is it, when is it coming, and what capabilities do we have to turn it off or restrict it where it doesn't make sense for it to live. So that's a new role altogether.
Well, Jay, really appreciate it. That's a great way to wrap things up. Jay, thanks a lot for joining me this morning. And if you have not already done so, please subscribe to Office Hours to get notifications about upcoming shows. We push these out on the first and third Wednesday of every month, always at 11 a.m. Eastern. So thank you, Jay. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.